You've reached Eric Herlock, digital editor at Lancaster Farming. I am away from my desk. Please leave me a message.
Hey everybody, this is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. I am your host, Eric Herlock, but I'm on vacation this week. But don't worry, we're still having a show. It's episode 39. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey of hemp discovery. Today we're going to talk to Matt Chambers and Darius Soltes from Supplant Commodities, a hemp brokerage firm in Colorado. And there's lots of other cool hemp stuff going on that I want to catch you up on, but that's going to wait because, like I said, I'm on vacation. Anyway, here's a quick message from our sponsor, and then we'll get into the show. Thanks. This week's podcast is brought to you by Wagners Greenhouses in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We met Alan Wagner a few weeks ago here on the podcast, episode 35. Go back and listen to it. He's got a great story. He was a commercial greenhouse grower for 40 years, but this year he went all in on industrial hemp. His greenhouses were full of high CBD Colorado genetics, a variety called Young Sim 10. He's already sold hundreds of thousands of hemp seedlings, but he's got some more that he thinks you can use at your hemp operation. Maybe you've got some losses in the field where you pulled out male plants, or maybe your germination rates weren't that great, or maybe you didn't even get a chance to plant. You've got your permit, you have your seed, but it's been raining and you didn't get a chance to plant. Here's your opportunity. It's not too late to get in the game. Really good prices too. You can get a flat of 72 plants for $56. That's less than 80 cents a plant. You need an acre? No problem. You need 5 plants? No problem. Call Wagners Greenhouses, 814-937-4056. Make sure you tell them you heard it on Lancaster Farming's Industrial Hemp Podcast. Wagners Greenhouses, 814-937-4056 for high CBD hemp seedlings available now. Matt Chambers, Darius Soltes, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you guys introduce yourselves for us one at a time?
Yeah, certainly, Eric. Thanks for having us. Matt Chambers, co-founder and broker, Supplant Commodities. We're an industrial hemp brokerage firm based out of Denver, Colorado, working with farmers, processors, manufacturers nationwide. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And I'm Darius Soltes. I'm the Chief Science Officer for Supplant Commodities. And I'm pleasure to be on the show. I've really enjoyed listening to the previous podcast.
Cool, thanks. You get points for that. All right, so Matt, you're the founder of the company?
Co-founder, yeah.
Co-founder, okay.
Our additional partner, Doug Baum, we work in the office out of Denver every day. He's not going to be on the call with us, but he's an integral component of the company. So Doug and I and Darius as well founded the company, but my background being in agricultural, traditional grain markets. I would call myself the founder, but technically co-founder.
Okay. So where were you in your career that you were like, I need to found a hemp brokerage company?
Well, that's a great question. So my career started in financial analysis with an investment management company, leading me to working on the floor in Chicago, leading to being a cash grain broker, trading corn, wheat, and soybeans, and working with some of the largest agricultural companies in the world, like ADM, Cargill, Conagra, Agribungi, and so forth. And then where I was in my career to start an industrial hemp brokerage firm was sitting around on a cold December morning, actually, in 2018, so not that long ago. Mm-hmm. And essentially, Doug and I were looking at online images through social media of piles of plastic washing up on shore, and we were disgusted. And so we said there's got to be a better alternative. So really the impetus for starting Supplant Commodities was to address biodegradable plastics and paper products. The climate change issue is a hot button topic, and we basically saw that the 2018 Farm Bill passed, legalizing industrial hemp nationwide, and we said, why don't we do something about it? So, that's kind of the short version of it.
And is that where the name comes from? You're going to try to supplant one thing with another, or tell me about the the origin of the name.
Yeah, I mean, I really love the name, and I can't take credit for it. Doug Baum, I'll put his last name in there, B-O-H-M. He came up with the name Supplant, and it's kind of a play on words. We're going to supplant plastics, and we're a commodities firm, hence Supplant Commodities. I really think it's catchy.
Yeah, it works. And then you're also going to supply plants. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Works on many levels. I like it. And so how do you go about starting a business like this?
Well, there's actually very few barriers to entry, surprisingly. And I only know that because of background working as a cash grain broker, as I said. So essentially, we just registered an LLC with the state of Colorado. Our biggest issue to start the company was IT infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I have a background in that. Doug is super proficient in that as well. So we're basically setting up a network. We're setting up our internal infrastructure from the IT standpoint. And then as a broker, essentially, aside from having the nuts and bolts working from the IT side, all we do is build relationships with people. So the startup costs are pretty low. There was no licensing requirement, although I wish there were one. And I'm pushing the DORA, the Department of Regulation Authority in the state of Colorado, to give us an accreditation of some type, so that we can eliminate bad actors that unfortunately come in because there are so few barriers to entry. But aside from the technical hurdles that we quickly addressed and streamlined, we are building relationships with people, and that's the nature of our business.
So you do you approach the farmers first, or do you find somebody who needs a supply of hemp first?
Yeah, well, that's kind of chicken and an egg question, and it's a really good one. It's also a supply and demand factor. So depending on whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, we're going to be skewed one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer your question directly, we contact everyone in the spectrum because the more information that we have, the better able we are to serve our clients. And at any given point in time, if there's an excess of sellers or an excess of buyers, the pendulum swings. That's also obviously going to affect price. So the more people that we're talking to consistently, the more liquid markets we're addressing, the better off we are and our clients are.
So let's say there's a plastics manufacturer. Would you approach them and try to sell them on the idea of switching to bioplastics?
Yeah, certainly. And, it's interesting you say that. We're later this afternoon, Doug and I are going to the Grand Hyatt for a panel speaking event where people are addressing this very issue that just happened to serendipitously occur today. We didn't even know about it till yesterday. So yeah, we will certainly do that. And the thing is, Eric, is that when we are having that conversation with a plastic manufacturer, the key point in their mind is, well, Matt, what is the price point? I can buy petroleum-based plastics for X. These biodegradable hemp-based plastics are going to be costing me Y. Shareholder responsibility, unless they have subsidies or some particularly extreme environmental conscious, they're going to say, well, I have to go with the cheaper one. So that's a hurdle that we experience, but we address that straightforward, and certainly that's an issue.
And I'm guessing that oil is cheaper for them because of subsidies. Is that true?
No, I think it's that the cost per barrel of oil as an input into the production of plastic is significantly less than what would be for hemp at this time. And not simply, and Darius can correct me if I'm wrong on this from a chemistry perspective, but it's my understanding that the reason being is that the infancy of the rebirth of the hemp industry is so new that the crop in and of itself and the various components that would go into the biodegradable plastics are less available than the traditional petroleum-based status quo.
Okay.
So we're basically just kind of in a transitionary phase.
Darius?
Oh, I think the starting materials for cellulose-based materials, there's more work on the front end. So you're actually breaking down the cellulose polymer and then doing other chemistry to make those monomers that would then go into plastics. Whereas petroleum products, you're basically just separating out the compounds you need from a mixture.
So the technology exists already, but it's just you don't have the supply you need to disrupt the market.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're making a small ripple, and that ripple is going to cascade. And I think there's a lot of good reasons, as I mentioned previously, regarding the global initiatives for climate change and so forth. So, but again, at the end of the day, economies of scale and financial market dynamics and balance sheets for companies kind of dictate how they make decisions regarding production of, well, let's say plastic or paper products. I mean, that's
Right.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that there are a number of products from industrial hemp that could go directly into construction and materials applications.
Mhm.
So certainly the fiber and then the herd for hempcrete, also pelletized biomass for insulation and livestock bedding, those sorts of things.
Okay.
So there are products that can be used without a lot of pre-processing.
How about for paper?
Certainly, and that's one of the things is that when we're looking at, cutting. I mean, just from a perspective of the average American audience, they're saying, yeah, we don't want to cut down trees, old growth forest, carbon sequestration, all of these keywords. They're talking about doing clear cutting in the Amazon and so forth.
Mhm.
Hemp is a extremely versatile product and a great alternative for paper. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That's just a given. We used to use paper. I mean, we used to use hemp to create paper back in the
Right.
day, and now we're coming full circle. I mean, it's about time.
So does that hinge on consumer demand?
Yeah, kind of. It's always a give and a take. There is an extreme push for ecologically sustainable paper products as well as plastic, and the consumer. I mean, you take the difference between a Whole Foods market, for instance, or a run-of-the-mill grocery store. People are paying a premium for environmental protection with the idea that they can sleep better at night by reducing their carbon footprint.
Mhm.
They're thinking about the next generation and so forth. So consumer demand is going to be pushing us more in this direction.
So, yeah, how do we get that consumer demand to change? That's always been my question.
We, like in Colorado, I mean, this is kind of, again, it's a small ripple in a pond, but there's a 10-cent tax for having a plastic bag in a grocery store.
Mhm.
I mean, that's small, but that's showing that, hey, people voted that in. That's an initiative, a ballot initiative where they said, if you're going to have a plastic bag, we're going to charge you 10 cents for it.
Right.
I mean, you're going to see the tide shifting slowly, unless I mean, like everything on a large scale like this, I think it moves slowly. But yeah, it's moving in that direction. And the thing is that people are more knowledgeable than they have been ever before, more information available to them on the internet. They're more health conscious, and they're looking at, again, the climate change issue, which is forefront in everyone's mind based on the push from the media and politicians. We're looking at it, and people are saying, all right, if we need to make adjustments in our lifestyle or we need to pay a premium for products that are more environmentally sustainable, then they're willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's so many areas where we can sort of farm our way out of the problems. We just need to get the sort of the money figured out, right? Because the companies aren't going to do it until they can make money from it, which is sad, I guess, on one level. But people need to eat.
Well, it is, and I 100% agree with you, Eric, because people are going to be motivated by their profit margin, and that is the reality of the free market capitalist system that we operate under. But it is my anticipation that sometime in the next maybe 18 months, we're going to see, and I don't have any rock hard data on this. It's just a good assumption on our behalf, is that we're going to see a subsidy coming into hemp. As soon as it gains mass adoption and people understand the distinction between cannabis, marijuana, and industrial hemp, I think that hemp has a very strong likelihood of receiving some sort of subsidy to offset the transition from the higher price point of petroleum-based versus organic hemp-based plastics and papers. And in order to facilitate that transition, I'm pretty sure we might need some government subsidies, and I think that will happen.
Okay. I like your optimism. Getting back to the biodegradable plastics, what does it biodegrade into? Does it just get, like with petroleum plastic, I understand that it sort of breaks down, but it always maintains the little tiny microscopic bits of plastic. Is that not the case for bioplastics?
Well, if I could speak to that, I think one of the problems when you talk about plastics that are accumulating in the oceans and whatnot, they basically break into smaller pieces from UV light and action of sunlight, whereas cellulose is a plant-based product. So there are things in the environment such as mold and fungus and whatnot that will actually break that down, and then basically just composting it the same way that forest or wood would degrade in the forest, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So all the basically the building blocks of at least for cellulose work that way, and then the polymers, I guess there are nanocellulose polymers, but then there's other bioplastics which are slightly different, but they're basically again, I guess not as resilient as some of the industrial polymers that are out there.
In the hemp world that you're in now, it's mostly the fiber side of things? You're not getting into brokering CBD deals, or are you doing that as well?
No, we certainly are brokering CBD deals. And, this kind of goes back to the reason that we started the company, and then the way that the market dynamics have led us, because, having a idealist, mission statement or objective for starting a company versus the reality in the market are two different things.
Right.
Coming into it with the idea for biodegradable paper and plastic products, we quickly found that the market is dominated by CBD, cannabinoids for medicinal properties, and that is dominating the market right now, and that is our primary focus, simply because that is where the demand is.
Sure.
And moving forward, we anticipate that there is going to be more of a use for the bast and hurd and fiber components, for the plastic and paper stuff. But CBD is the big boy on the block at the moment.
Right. Yeah, it seems
and
like
even with even with plants that are being grown for flower, we still have roughly 75% of the biomass that still contains the hemp herds and the fiber. So we're hoping that even though we're working with farmers that are primarily growing it as far as like the cash crop for the essential oils and the CBD components, that we'd also be able to bring that other portion of the plant to market and find buyers for them as well.
Okay. Would there be enough biomass left over in some of these smaller farms, like that it would be worth their while to ship that out to somebody?
Yeah, and the thing about that is that that's going to be, if they're not selling it, they're going to be disposing of it in some way, shape, or form, or they're going to, if they're potentially could be paying someone to ship it off their property. So, but that's in addition. So it's kind of, it's a complicated question looking at logistic supply chain. So whether that component comes off the farm directly or then gets extracted at a processing facility, there are multiple factors. And what we're looking to do is maximize the entirety of the plant and every use that it has.
Okay.
So we address it in about 4 different primary areas. And so we're brokering each of those constituent components.
Okay. How important are local supply chains? I take it that you guys are sort of looking at this industry from a national perspective. But is there any reason to think that local supply chains might work better for the communities?
Yeah, certainly. And we are looking at it from a national perspective, but the best answer to that question is that local farmers and processors are going to incur fewer transportation costs. They're also going to share a sense of community a little bit more and want to support one another.
Mm-hmm.
So nationwide price would probably dictate that, but if you're looking at local versus going, 2,000 miles for pennies on the dollar, where does that middle ground occur?
Right.
So certainly local farmers are more incentivized to work with local processors and local manufacturers. Certainly that's the case in Colorado.
Okay. What other states are really like ramped up as far as industrial hemp goes? I mean, I know there's Colorado and Oregon's a big player. Maybe some of those up in the upper Midwest? Like where's a lot of your sort of out of Colorado business coming from?
Oregon and Kentucky and Tennessee. Okay. So we're also seeing stuff coming out of North Carolina, South Carolina, some out of Montana, North Dakota, West Virginia, and Virginia. That's pretty much what's on our radar at the moment.
Okay. Do you have much contact with Pennsylvania?
No, we are working with some people out of, I should say, at the current time, we have one contact out of New Jersey and New York, and they're talking about opening a processing facility in that area. But out of Pennsylvania, it's a little bit, I don't know if it's just our lack of scope on market, depth in that area, but mm-hmm. I wouldn't lie to you and tell you that we have a strong representation in that area.
I think we do have one client that's kind of a larger agricultural processing facility that they do. They're growing their own product and then also using this hemp train product for manufacturing. And then we're also seeing some material in action coming out of New York State as well, if I'm not mistaken, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, of course, yeah, and so Darius, I apologize for that. So this is we do have somebody out of PA, and this we can go full circle as to why that was kind of on off my radar screen, because the CBD component, the flower, has been on the forefront of my to-do list all the time with all of the buyers and sellers I talk to. Mm-hmm. And the individual that Darius is referring to out of Pennsylvania is typically focusing on fiber biomass, which again goes back to the plastics and so forth. And that has been an underserved component of the market. So Darius, absolutely, we do have someone in PA.
So here in Pennsylvania, this is the first year that the state has allowed unlimited acreage and basically unlimited permits. So maybe by this time next year, you'll have a lot more business coming out of Pennsylvania.
Certainly hope so. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
We'll
I think
put them in touch with
Eric, Yeah, I think, Eric, one of the things I think I actually heard from one of your other podcasts is that there's farmers out there that are interested in getting into the industry, and they have acreage to plant, but they don't necessarily know if there's going to be a market for their product after it comes out at harvest. So we're trying to reach out, get those connections, and let people know that there is markets available, and trying to encourage people to grow more biomass and have an opportunity to bring that to market as well.
For any of those farmers listening, what's the best way to contact you all?
Yeah, well, our website is probably the best way. It's supplantcommodities.com.
Okay.
And that's SUPPLANT commodities.com. And I can be reached directly by email, matt@supplantcommodities.com. Anybody can fill out a contact form on our website. Our phone number is obviously listed there. We want to make ourselves as easy as possible to be contacted by anybody who could potentially benefit from our brokerage services. And our phone number, for people listening who just want to jot it down, you call me and one of our team will answer the phone. It's 303 578 8782.
Okay. And I'll list all of these contact methods on the show page for this episode.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how do you make money? What end of the deal is your profit coming from?
Yeah, common question. So we operate under NGFA guidelines, and I'm sure your listeners will be familiar with the National Grain and Feed Association. And all the trade rules are on our website. And so, and I know a follow-up question is going to be, well, is hemp a grain? Maybe if you want to qualify the seed portion of it.
Right.
But speaking to the CEO of NGFA, NGFA grade grain trade rules apply for hemp as well, or could be applied to them.
Okay.
We have unilaterally adopted them because that's the background that I come from, and they've already covered this every question under the sun ad nauseum. So we don't have to recreate the wheel.
Okay.
So how we get paid, I mean, it's a very important question. There's so many moving pieces, especially when you start talking about logistics, transportation, et cetera. So to answer your question, Eric, we get paid on a commission-only basis.
Okay.
And we charge the seller a commission. That's going to vary at the moment, depending on the size of it and the circumstances, 5% of gross sale or 5 cents per point based on CBD pricing.
Oh.
And then we also do consulting, which is a little bit different, but primarily for our brokerage services, it's a nickel per point.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And I'm happy to extrapolate on that further if necessary.
No, that makes sense. Changing subject a little bit, how soon before like the big auto companies are going to get involved in using hemp for their cars, either the interiors or the exteriors? Any sense of that?
I don't see anything on that on my radar. I think that they're a lot lower hanging fruit before the auto companies come in, but it's not an area of my expertise, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if there's a European manufacturer. I'm not sure if I've heard of any domestic manufacturers, but essentially it's using the fiber component as a composite material for the, basically, manufacturing of panels and things like that. So
Right.
I think as long as, they can utilize that and have the right properties, and I think that's something that will also gain momentum.
Okay. Yeah, I spoke to a scientist from Ford, I guess last fall, and she's in using different biomaterials for the interiors of cars, and she was like, we can't get enough of this. The Farm Bill hadn't passed yet, but she's like, she made it seem like the auto companies are kind of champing at the bit to get access to a whole lot of hemp fiber, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that might come into play again with subsidies because especially the auto industry is heavy on government bailouts and so forth. And, as soon as you can start marketing a hemp car that's environmentally friendly and offsetting your carbon footprint, that's when we're going to see that.
Right. There was another guy on the show last year who he built a sports car out of hemp, the outside, the body of it, sort of like a fiberglass kind of thing. And he's a proponent of carbon negative technology. If we can get as much carbon out of the atmosphere and into, material things that would sort of lock up that carbon. And, that would, hopefully do wonders for the climate crisis.
I would think that like hemp products like hempcrete would also serve the same function.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have the herd material, which is obviously cellulose, and that's being incorporated into construction material that has a very long life cycle for its use. Yeah,
there's a lot of exciting things going on here with hemp, but we just need to get the sort of the markets to turn in favor, which you guys are sort of right on the forefront. Are there other hemp brokerages that you are competing with?
Yeah, certainly. I do think that, This goes back to one of the things we addressed earlier, Erica, is, how did we get started? What does it take to get started?
Mm-hmm.
Barriers, excuse me, barriers to entry. So anybody can just pick up a phone and call somebody. We call these joker brokers. And what they end up doing is misrepresenting the industry, giving it a really bad name. This is where we go into the realm of bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
And that is simply inexperienced people that are misrepresenting the buyer or seller, and that adds to a lot of confusion. So we do have competition in that regard, and a lot of the time that I do is just vetting people and filtering out. It's not our competition. I mean, we should all be allies in this because
Right.
price discovery and the most effective sharing of information is good for determining where the market price is. As far as I can tell, there are, a handful of people on the level of Supplant, but, we're trying to set the standard and, be the best that we can to support the industry and our clients.
Are there things that farmers should sort of look out for, like red flags from these joker brokers and bad actors?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, do you have a website? And is your email address not ending at Gmail or yahoo.com? Do you have a phone number listed? Are you available? What is your background? Are you on social media? In order for farmers that are getting inundated at times by bad actors, they're busy enough doing their job that, someone might be charming on the phone or so forth. And these guys say, hey, we have a little bit of rapport. Great. But what any advice for the farmers would be, hey, use your best judgment, do your due diligence, check out their website, have a couple conversations with them, start small.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody gives you some grandiose deal, they're probably a bad actor. So farmers are smart people. Use your discernment. You can see our website versus any of our competitors, and it speaks for itself.
Yeah, I've looked at your website, and there's a lot of great information there, sort of very simply explaining what you do and why you're doing it. So yeah, supplantcommodities.com. A question I will often ask my guests is, how can farmers avoid getting the short end of the stick? And I think, that answer that you just gave partially answers that from your end. Is there anything else that you can think of that would sort of help farmers to not get taken advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I didn't even know you were going to ask me this question, but it's extremely relevant. The biggest way that farmers can avoid not getting the short end of the stick is to have a proper hedge.
Explain.
Yeah. So currently there is not a hemp futures contract. It is my understanding that in the first quarter of 2020, the CME or someone else, or some other exchange, I should say rather, will be issuing some type of hemp futures contract. So for your farmers and your audience, they understand what that means because they trade basis, and basis is cash minus futures. And what that does is that allows to lock in a price because there's a hedge. So right now, people planting hemp without having a futures contract available for them is problematic. Insurance, there are some people out there that pay insurance. That's another asset that farmers can use in order to mitigate risk.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other thing that Supplant Commodities is offering at the moment, which very few are, is we write forward contracts. And they differentiate from futures because futures are exchange traded and forward contracts are an agreement directly between a buyer and a seller. So for a farmer, if they have an estimation of what their yield is going to be and what their input costs are at harvest, we write forward contracts on their behalf so that they can avoid market fluctuation if they want to lock in that price margin where they're comfortable locking it in.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I'm happy to discuss that further. It's one of the specialities and areas of expertise that Supplant has, and I have particularly working in the industry for so long in the agricultural industry, not the hemp industry, but the same things apply. So we're offering that to anybody that would like to learn more.
Matt Chambers and Darius Soltes from Supplant Commodities, a hemp brokerage firm based in Colorado. All right, thank you all for listening to today's show. I'm going to get back to my vacation. Don't forget, you can always reach me by email, podcast@lancasterfarming.com. You can follow us on the Instagram. And be sure to check out lancasterfarming.com. All sorts of great agricultural news right there. And while you're at it, subscribe to our print edition. You can go to lancasterfarming.com/podcast deal. Yeah, you will not be disappointed. All right, that does it for me. Thanks again. I'll see you in the newspaper. All that stuff. Today's show is copyright 2019, Lancaster Farming. Lancaster Farming newspaper is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. Any music you may have heard is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.
Industrial hemp.